Good. Well, like I said, thank you for coming. I am going to go ahead and share my screen in just a second. Present. And there we go. Perfect. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. We're set. Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you for coming today. I'm going to share one of my all-time favorite tools that I think is probably the least utilized tool ever, and that is Google Earth, and see how we can use that in classrooms to support education. So for some of you, I have not had a chance to meet before. My name is Karen Leonard. I am currently the Director of Education Technology and Computer Science at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. And we are looking for a Director of Computer Science as a standalone position. So I know you're probably not having any names to throw into the hat, but if you know of anyone who is not currently under contract and would like to come work at the State Department of Education, we would appreciate that. And I didn't say hello to Nathan earlier, but hello, Malcolm. I hope things are going well. I hear that your school district or your school is kind of under siege right now with COVID, and I hope that you are staying healthy. Again, you can reach out to me for anything, but real quick, I would love to have you put in the chat box, on a scale of cat, how are you doing today? And I'm going to pop that chat box over here so I can see. I'm thinking that I'm at a 6 right now. So okay. You know, I love anything like this that just kind of brings people's personality into a virtual environment, which we know is a great way to connect with students. So, oh, Nathan, woo! I'm not sure if that's a good 9 or I've really had a crazy day 9. So hopefully things are going well. Malcolm, oh, I'm sure, especially at this time of day. So I will be going on. Okay, so this is actually another interactive thing that I would love to have you join us. I have an image. I used to be a gifted teacher, and I really liked to play almost like 20 questions with the students. But I would like to have you put some guesses in the chat box as to what you think that image is of. And obviously there's a point to this. It's not just for fun. The wait time is always so hard on this because I get so excited. I want people to guess. Brain scan, good question, good guess. An aerial shot. Malcolm, an aerial shot of what? He's on the right track. I'm gonna give it about another 60 seconds, 30 seconds somewhere. Craters, good guess. That could look aerial of mountains, another good guess, Nathan. This was one of the things that I did as a geography teacher. In addition to some of the close-up pictures that I would do with my gifted, I specifically used this image when I was teaching geography. And I would have students guess, and you're like, if you're really looking close, inside of each circle, there are smaller concentric circles. And then there are those lines that connect them. So I'm going to back out just a little bit. And I want you to see that these are this is farmland off the coast of Saudi Arabia, or I mean, on the coast. So actually, it's not even Saudi Arabia, I don't think, because that area on the right-hand side is the Nile River. And then we would be able to get into a discussion on, well, that seems like a really strange shape for fields. I wonder why farmers would plant crops in circles. Do you have any guesses? You know, it's one of those things that we probably take for granted and don't think of very much. That is their method of irrigation. So they're able to put a pipe and it will spray in a circle. And that way, you know, they're able to make sure, and it's such an arid climate, that their crops are able to get water. And it's those little things that always excite me and excited the students. And then boy, you know, I would say, okay, this is the general area of the world. Can you find specifically where that is? Another thing we did was I tried to Skype around the world to 80 places. We did really, really well. We got 67 different locations, but one of the locations was a flight attendant mother. And she was talking to us from Israel. And so we knew she was in Israel. We knew the name of the city. And she referenced something she could see out of her hotel window. And boy, I can tell you that my kids went into Google Earth and they just searched and scavenged. And we were actually able to narrow it down to 2 hotels. So she had done a test call with me earlier and I shared that. And my students were actually able to successfully guess or narrow it down to 2 hotels just by looking at the environment, the landscape. And it was a wonderful way to involve students in geography. So today we're going to talk about Google Earth and how to use it in the classroom. And then I've got an open forum time. If you've got any questions, answers, things you want to share that are going successful, things you're like, oh my gosh, what in the world can you do to help? So that's what I have. And I do not believe it will take a full hour. If you have just joined, we do have a bit.ly link. It's in the top of every slide. That way, if I don't get a chance to put it back in the chat box, you're able to access this in the future. So Google Earth. Many of you know what Google Earth is. I think most of us do, but it's a computer program that shares a 3D representation of the Earth, and it's based upon satellite images. And I don't know if you've actually seen one of the Google Earth vehicles, but it's really cool. They've got the camera on the top, and often it's a little car and it says Google all over it. And it just takes the video. If it's for the street view, it does it that way. But then we also have the satellite view. And I know my kids would always be like, oh my gosh, is it live? Is it live? And we had to talk about the fact that no, it's not live, but we do have different satellite images over the years, and we're going to talk about that as well. But I just was able to drive students into both science and social studies and literature with this. So there are 3 versions of Google Earth. One is web-based. That's probably the easiest one to access because, well, I'll tell you that in a minute. There's also mobile and there's a desktop pro. So the web-based is great. The pros, you can access it anywhere. You do not need to download or install anything, which will probably make your IT people really excited. And it's free, which we always love in education. A con with that is there's not access to all of the advanced feature tools. So, you know, it's a pretty good, robust system. If you want to do some of the more complex things, you may actually have to use another version. I'm really not going to say too much about the mobile version because I'm sure that pretty much any phone or iPad you have has that on there. It does not have access to those advanced tools either, but it is free and it's pretty awesome. Then you have the Desktop Pro, which is also free. It does have the access to some of the advanced features, but the con is it does require downloading and installation, which, you know, does take time and effort. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little bit about the web-based tool. Each of my images are automatically hyperlinked, so that way you don't have to search for URLs. It's very simple and easy to use. I'm just going to pop in there and open that up myself. And yes, it does take a few minutes to load and install, or not load, not install, but load. And there we go. I loved it because, you know, when you're trying to teach younger children about the Earth's rotation and how half of the Earth does not have sun when the other half does, you've got some great visuals right there. What is pretty much live are the clouds and the weather. So right now we know that there are some issues down here in the Caribbean with some of the hurricane and stormy weather. I love that part because when you're teaching weather units with students, they can really visually see. On the left-hand side, I have some tools. I've got just the information. You can search anywhere you want. I'm going to skip that because I figured you've got that one. The Voyager, I'm going to come back to in a minute, but it really provides you with some other opportunities and tools, kind of more of the lower end. The dice is one of those randomizers. I loved this when I was teaching because we could just kind of randomly go to one place each day. You have a little bit of a Wikipedia definition or description of the area, and then we can go in and we can see the land. And I mean, looking at that, how many times do students really get to go in and look at a volcano and look, we can see that how would anyone get to this island? Well, it's either by boat or I can see an airstrip right there. And, you know, we're talking about the craters and how this could be a mountaintop of mountains underwater. And there's just so much to explore. I know some school districts have an issue with Google Earth because while this was a photo that was put in by Google, there are like definitely on the pro version, there's a little layer that you can check that allows anyone's photos to be submitted. And I think that's what some of the schools are uncomfortable with, the ability to add photos because they're not all vetted and checked. But I thought that this is great and we can just fly on to another space back through up here, sorry. We have the ability to make a project, which I'm going to explain in more detail. We have this tool right here is one of my favorite tools because we're looking at the distance across the crater. And I'm able to click on the measuring tool and measure. Oh, click in, oh, drop and drag. So that crater is about 1 mile across, which is kind of fun because, you know, it doesn't really look that big. And then we can compare that. Maybe we can look at a map close to our school and measure 1 mile away from our school so that they can get a visual of what that is. I can also go ahead and change that to metrics or inches and maybe have my students do the conversion for me. So we also have our Google Voyager. This provides so many different opportunities. And I'm going to go back to my slide deck real quick and forward some of that before I go on. Also, under Voyager, one of the things that we can view is the warming planet. And it's actually time-lapse through Google Earth. So as we come back here, and let's see if I can get it through here instead, our warming planet. Some of the quality of images during some of these are not quite as maybe crystal clear as I would like to see. So this is actually sources of energy. It didn't take me to our warming planet. There we go. But as we're talking about the fact that supposedly this summer has been one of the hottest summers on record, we're able to go back through, and now I'm up in Alaska. I can see that I'm viewing the Columbia Glacier. And if you notice over here, it's going to start back in 1985, and it's going to go through from 1985 to, I believe it's 2020. And we're able to see some of those changes. And if I leave it there, it's going to go through and play all of that again, which could lead to some good and good discussion. And when I'm finished watching this one, I can see that I also have 9 more that will talk about time lapse. So maybe we know that that one's in Alaska. Let's pick a different place around the world and see if the climate or the warming, the temperature has changed. And here we go in. This is up in Greenland. And I think that this one is, well, this one's kind of clear, but it's just kind of interesting to see the variance. So we're talking global warming. There's real life application at places that these students would never be able to probably go see in person. In addition to the warming planet, I am able to go in and explore like I just did. And here I took a picture of a mountain in Italy, and there are settings within so that you're able to not just make them a flat linear globe, but you're able to turn it into 3D. And then I can pull my mouse around and see the different views. Again, I could use the ruler and measure the distance from peak to peak, or try to measure the distance from the top to the bottom. I can also examine, okay, so I am going to exit back out of this. This was probably one of my favorite activities that I ever did with the students. We always had such a difficult time grasping, and it's gonna, my mouse doesn't, there we go, grasping icebergs and just understanding how unbelievably large. Here's another thing that I would do is we could stop, there we go. We could measure the distance between the tip of South America, I mean from, yeah, South America to Antarctica. But when I zoom in, really zoom in, sometimes you have to kind of explore around. Oh, I think this one's going to be good. So we're looking at this little iceberg right here. And I would ask students how big they think that iceberg is. Because, I mean, think back to some of the, maybe the Christmas shows or the movies, you see people floating away on icebergs and they're all pretty tiny chunks of ice. So I would take some guesses, and then of course, for some reason, the ruler is not available at this time because I'm still in warming planet. So we now know we have to exit one of those. And then I can go back up. There's some more icebergs. I can measure this one here. And from there, 4.5 miles. And that just seems unfathomable when you're thinking about something as big as an iceberg. And if you're thinking, if it's 4.5 miles across, how big would it be under the water? How deep does it go in order to be stable? And we can measure how far it would be to go from, I'm gonna get done here and start new. And how far is this tip from land? So over 1.5 miles right there. And I think that kind of brings, again, some of this to life for students. So then you can also create a story. And I think that this is where we actually, you know, students like to go in and explore. Adults like to go in and explore. I've had so many conversations with people lately that they'll just go into Google Earth and kind of get sucked in, dream vacations, places they've already been, looking at things like the Grand Canyon. But students can actually go in and create their own stories. And that is one of the features on both the Pro and the web-based. I can go in, add new features, drop my little icons showing where I've been. And when I do that, little boxes come up and students can write descriptions as to what's important about that location. So when you're thinking about that, think about some of the literature stories maybe your students read that occur in places. And, you know, if I were studying the Oregon Trail, I could map the locations that people would have stopped along the way and talk about how far, you know, they walked each day. What would that have been like? how far would that be in comparison to someplace local? And this could be even a good introduction activity for them to share some of maybe the places that they've lived or trips that they've been on. Oh my goodness, I also absolutely loved the, let me go back to this one. Again, sorry. If I go back to Voyager and look at Earth at night, talking population density and understanding, there we go, we're going to explore Earth at night. And you're thinking, well, Oklahoma, I moved here from Atlanta. Atlanta proper had the population of higher population than the entire state of Oklahoma. So when we're looking at that big pile or chunk of lights, I mean, we're looking over here, I mean, we can see where people have settled. We can also get into discussions about why they've settled where they have. The majority of these, some of the larger cities, we can see people live close to the water because transportation, shipping. And then we can go around and compare that. Look at Africa. I mean, we can see up at the mouth of the Nile where people live, but I mean, there are some areas out here where there are no lights. Then we can talk about quality of life, electricity. We can see locations, and then you can maybe talk to them about what is the comparison of, here we're going to zoom into New Delhi, India. And obviously we can see some of the paths that people travel from city to city. And I just think that that's pretty amazing to be able to do. Another tool that you might like is some of the activities. And this came from the web-based version. Again, I talked about creating stories. It does give you a starter's guide. It can show you examples of some of the stories that are already created. And oftentimes those are great models for students to see. I don't know if you grew up playing Carmen Sandiego. I think that was actually past my time, but I know that when my kids were younger, we would play Carmen Sandiego, and there's actually a pre-built Carmen Sandiego with inside Google Earth. And again, we have the time lapse. So that's pretty amazing as well. And then we get into Google Earth Pro. And like I said, this is free. It does take a download, but as you can see on the left-hand side and across the top, many more capabilities. And I am actually going to exit here, and then I will come back to that. But I have Google Earth installed on my computer, and I am going to open that up and share that with you. And of course, it does take a second or two to install it. You would have to probably do some of the updates with this, since this is downloaded. And I'm going to pull it over here to the screen. And now we can actually see outlines. I can go over within my layers and show as little or as much as I want. This one right here was talking about photos, that some of which have been inserted by multiple other people, and you just may want to go in and check that off. 3D buildings are weather. We can go through and see the clouds, your borders, your places. Up here, there's already some tours built in. The sightseeing tour, if you have your 3D buildings started, and I was having issues with this the other day. I need to go back into some of the settings. But I can see, as I move my mouse, you're going to see, I can see my latitude and longitude scroll across the bottom. And when I zoom in closer and closer, it will tell me the elevation of some of these locations. We can go in, like I said, and maybe look at some of the information that's been posted. it just is wonderful. Some of these, like when we're talking the rainforest and we're talking deforestation, you're able to see the differences in pictures from place to place. And when you zoom in close enough, and I think it might take you to go all the way to Street View, it will actually tell you the date and the time that the image was taken. And see if I can zoom back out. My mouse does not like to work with this. But if I were to go into one of the larger cities, and Amazon, let's see, Venezuela, Caracas, there we go. And I can zoom all the way in. See some of the icons that pop up. Again, I could turn those off on this side if I wanted to, but then we can go in super close. And when I get into a place that I'd really like to see, I can drag my little person. Now see, we have our 3D buildings, which don't always look as good from this image, but there I am. I am able to walk around on the street if the Google car has been there. And in this case, we can see that that's not a place that the mapping has been done. But it is kind of interesting. I know my students would like to look at the street they live on, see where they're going. Another thing that we would do with this is there is, when you create things within Google Earth, they are saved as KML resources. And I cannot remember what that stands for, but they allow you to download a resource and open it up within Google Earth. So one of the things that I found right here is the download for the tectonic plates around the world. And I took a screenshot here, and you can see the tectonic plates. And they used to have a version, and I'm really saddened that they took this off, that would show you the most recent earthquakes and volcanoes, and you were able to line those up on the tectonic plates. But there are several other KML resources here that can be downloaded and used with Google Earth. Many of these are related to science specifically, and it will also tell you how to save some. There's air traffic, 13 colonies templates. Also, if you noticed on this version of Google Earth, across the top here, I can pin locations. So again, I could pin it and have people write information about each location. I can notice the growth of this over the past 24, or the sunlight over the past 24 hours. I can go through, and this is something you probably need to allow students time to play with before, but I can go out into the sky, and it gives them a view of the solar system as well. And they're able to explore and see information on different stars, satellites, and some wonderful information there. And then just like in the other version, I'm able to measure from place to place. And obviously in space, that probably wouldn't do it very good for us. But some other information, the 3D views. So I was teaching students a couple different things. We were talking about Washington, D.C., and how students or people could walk out of the White House. I believe that's in my next image. Walk out of the White House and look around, and here's what you would see. This is how close your Washington Monument is. You can see that out of the White House. And it kind of put things into perspective, especially as we were looking down on it and then looking in the street view. You actually in the past were able to go into the White House, and each of these arrows will allow you to navigate in those directions and see what was in there. It was really fun because students would like to look and see what was in the White House. Like I was talking about the 3D views, I did actually teach at a Christian school for several years, and we were having discussions, and this could be any maybe world history class. We were talking about the birth of religion, and you're thinking that Jerusalem is the birth of many religions, and we were able to measure the distance from some of the different origination buildings, such as the Wall of the Sepulchre, Church of the Sepulchre, and the Wailing Wall. And it was amazing to see that all three, there were three different religions, and all three were started or had one of their most important locations within 1 mile of each other. And then we were able to talk about, well, how did that diffuse across the world? And how do you determine, obviously they're all have some kind of connection if they were born in that same region. So it just allowed a variety of viewpoints and thoughts. If you're a person that has decided that Google Earth might be something you would like to use, I do like to add resources and ideas. Matt Miller is a wonderful EdTech blogger, and he shares some ideas for K-12 implementation of Google Earth in the classroom. National Geographic also shares some wonderful ideas. Here is more information on having students create Google Earth stories and or storytelling. You know, I was thinking of using it with people that have already written stories, but students could write their own stories and then be able to plot their own stories on Google Earth as well. One of my favorite things that is still in existence, but it doesn't sound like they're creating anymore, are Google Lit Trips. This book title I thought was very pertinent. I used to teach Beaver 1793 to my 6th grade students, and that was all about yellow fever. And it occurred in the Boston area. Well, we were able to actually, this is a pre-created Google Earth Lit Trip. I had to go to Welcome to Google Lit Trips and register for just free registration. It does ask if you want to donate. You do not need to. I was able to just submit information, and look, there are so many different titles that you can download. So if you're a literature teacher, if you're a history teacher, if you're a geography teacher and would like to provide some integration, so even our high school titles are in here. You know, Night by Eli Whitesell is such an intriguing book, and you'll actually be able to see some of the locations where that occurred. Now, of course, these locations for the most part are shown in current day, but some of them do have imagery, maybe not satellite imagery, but imagery from the past. So you're able to kind of get a view of how it's changed in the locations since the story occurred. So I didn't know, I would love to hear some ideas on how you might use Google Earth with students. Any ideas? I know Timmy is a new to science, well, not new to science, she's taught science for years, but new back in the classroom. And I'm thinking, I cannot remember what 6th grade science entails here in Oklahoma, but you know, if you need any ideas, all you'd have to do is email, and I would be glad to share thoughts and ideas and links and brainstorm with you.
I'm teaching earth science, Karen.
Okay, so see, I mean, boy, you can go down into the Grand Canyon and look at the layers of the earth there. And oh my goodness, there's so much that you could do with that, Timmy. And I'm hoping that you have at least teacher access. You know, students love to be able to go in and navigate on their own. But like I said, you know, some schools have some issues with some of the different features. And so maybe it's just a teacher version. Nathan said he likes using the clock to change the imagery date to see how the landscape has changed, especially when we're talking about urbanization, or if you're talking about the growth of some of the cities. It's a great visual for students. He likes to look for the drought years and look at lakes or rivers to see what's underwater. I think that, you know, so many people have issues with technology and find fault or are fearful of integrating technology. And I just think that Google Earth is one of those tools that is completely underrated, and just let students explore the world and see it from a science point of view or a geography point of view. When you are within Google Street view. And if you jump into a city, maybe in France, like Paris, and you're able to look at the cars that are alongside the road and the different street signs, again, it's just providing a cultural experience for students. We know we can't take them everywhere, but they're able to see how other people live. And I think that that's really exciting. Another one that you may like if you are trying to encourage students to think is a website called GeoGuessr. And I'm going to type that into the chat box. It's GeoGuessr without the E before the R. And what GeoGuessr does is it's basically like Google Earth, but it will take you and drop you in somewhere. And students are able to make guesses as to where they think that they are. They're able to travel up and down roads, look at street signs, and then it will measure how close their guess is to the actual location. And again, it was just kind of exploring, and people would talk about, oh my goodness, I was in England and we keep hearing about the moors, but I just can't picture what a moor was. And that's right there where we were. So I hope you found this helpful. Again, I'm always willing to brainstorm and plan with you. My next meeting in September will be on digital citizenship, providing some of the basics of digital citizenship. I am a firm believer in the fact that if teachers are giving students devices, that teachers are responsible for ensuring the safety of devices and the safety of the students when using those devices. And these meetings are open to anyone, whether they're a tech person, whether they're a content person. I'm trying to make sure that they are useful to any grade or any content area. So you're always welcome to invite people. There again is the access to this slide deck because of the active links that you might be interested in reviewing. And we will be meeting on the fourth Monday of each month from 3:30 to 4:30. There's a registration link right there. If you register for one session, you will register for all sessions. And I will try to send out a reminder email the day before each of the sessions or early that morning. And our next date will be September 27th. And then we will be skipping the November date because that's very close to Thanksgiving. So I've just kind of bumped it back into December. And then closer to the start of the new year, I will share our 2022 meeting dates. Some other resources for you, for people you work with that you can share. Last summer in 2020, I did a weekly Tech Tool Tuesday session where for just about an hour, hour and a half, I would share information on a variety of commonly used technology tools. The recordings of each of those and the slide decks are all available right there on the Education Technology SDE webpage. You're also able to subscribe to the EdTech Monthly email on this. Other things that you may find useful, in addition to my Tech Tool Tuesdays, I have a tutorial database. Actually, I have two. One is just general EdTech tools. Another one is Google tools. Each of those have their have different tools in there. You're able to filter these according to the tool or the user, and they can be sorted by teacher, parent, administrator, student. You even have the level of use. So if you're a beginner and you're like, I don't want to be intimidated, there are many beginner level tutorials, and there are some advanced, and you're able to see specifically what's covered. As the school year starts, I know many of our districts are using Canvas. And if you've got new Canvas users, you may want to refer them to this. And in addition to that, I also have a resource database that has a variety of teacher tools, manipulatives, games, SEL check-ins. I continue to add to this. Not every single one has been vetted, but if it looks like something that teachers could use and manipulate to make it their own, I've added that. So thank you very much for coming today. I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording.